Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, Glacier in Waterton, a cross-border adventure, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Jake Richards. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Jake, take it away.
Thanks, Rob. So, my name is Jake, and I'm going to be walking you through our Glacier and Waterton adventure. If you're new to the Daily Dose of Nature webinar series, we kind of cover a lot of different topics, most weekdays, anything relating to the wildlife or the trips that we run. This is part of the series that we call Know Before You Go. So, I'm going to be going through more of the nuts and bolts of our Glacier and Waterton trip. I know some of you on the call probably have already booked a trip and you just want to learn a little bit more about what the trip entails. Maybe you have some questions about what to pack or what to expect, or maybe you're interested in booking this trip and you want to dive a little deeper. That's what this is for. So let's get started. I'll start off by introducing myself again. My name is Jake Richards. I'm originally from Vermont. Spent 30 plus years there. Got my undergraduate degrees there in Vermont, and was actually a forklift driver for quite a long time, about a decade. But then I moved west and did the Teton Science School's graduate program right here in Grand Teton National Park, which is actually where I'm tuning in from today. Up here getting prepped for our Yellowstone season to start. But it is a beautiful time of year in the Rockies, so I'm really happy to be talking about Glacier, which is just a little bit farther north up the road. After I finished the Teton Science School's graduate program, I finished my master's degree at Utah State University, just about 3 or 4 hours south of here, still right in the heart of the Rockies, in Logan, Utah, and that's where I currently live. I've been there a number of years now. And yeah, I'm just so happy to be back up in this part of the country. I've been with NatHab for going on, this is my 5th season now. As you can see from these photos, I've kind of guided throughout our U.S. National Park system, a lot of different programs from the Florida Everglades to, Glacier to the canyons of the Southwest. But I'm the lead guide for our Glacier and Yellowstone programs. So I spend a lot of my year in those places, and they're places that I love very much, and really excited to get our Glacier season started. It's right around the corner. So this is a quick overview of the topics that I'm going to cover today. So first, I'm going to talk about why Glacier is such an incredible place and why I think everybody should put it on their bucket list to visit. I'll talk a little bit about the geography, some of the history, and those topics, obviously, when we're on trip, we'll go into great depth talking about some of those topics. So I'll just kind of give an overview just so we kind of have some common language and you'll know what we're talking about. And then, like I said, I'll get into some of the more logistical information for this trip, including, talking about the lodging, the transportation, the food, itinerary, what gear to pack, and then I'll close the presentation with a few photos of the wildlife that we're hoping to see on this trip, because I'm sure that's why you're here. That's why I'm here anyway. So why is this place so special? Why do I love Glacier and Waterton so much? Well, I am incredibly grateful that I've had the privilege to guide in some really incredible places across the United States. There are some beautiful landscapes like Yosemite, like the Grand Canyon. I've also been able to guide in places that have incredible wildlife and biodiversity, like Yellowstone, like the Florida Everglades. And the reason why I put Glacier at the top of my list, I do consider it my favorite national park, it's because you really have both of those things in one place. The landscapes are incredible, as you can see from some of these photos. These photos are all from trips, photos that I've taken, sites that we see on these trips. And in addition to the landscapes being just awe-inspiring, the wildlife is also just incredible. It's considered an intact ecosystem, meaning it has all of those large carnivores, all of those species that have lived there for thousands of years are still in that ecosystem. And that's not something that we can say for a lot of the lower 48, just because of the impact that humans have had on the landscape. So an intact ecosystem is really a valuable place and really an incredible place to spend 9 days, which is the length of this trip. So Glacier National Park, as you can see from these maps, if you look at the red circle on the left, it's right on the border of Montana and Alberta, Canada. It abuts the Canadian border, and on the Canadian side, you also have Waterton Lakes National Park, which you can see in that white area on the top on the right-hand side. So together, these parks are kind of unique in that they are considered the Waterton Glacier International Peace Park. So even though they're two separate parks in two separate countries, they share resources, they share research, some management considerations are also shared. And there's really a collaboration between the two countries and the management of the two parks in a really unique and special way because, again, like I've said in other presentations, animals, plants, natural communities, they don't adhere to these man-made borders that we've kind of imposed on the landscape. So having two protected areas that border each other that are kind of managed in collaboration with each other is really important to the preservation of the landscape, but also in just determining best practices for how to manage the wildlife and the landscapes. So when we're on the landscape, obviously, over the course of a 9-day trip, we talk about a lot of different topics. You're going to get sick of hearing my voice if I'm your guide on one of these trips, just because there's so much to talk about. Two of the big factors, two of the greatest influences on the landscape that are very apparent in these two photos are wildfire and glaciers. And so wildfire has been, a part of this landscape throughout the American West, for, since time immemorial. And you can see from the photo on the left, it's a very visible part of the landscape. It's a very important part of the landscape. There are a lot of species that have adapted to wildfire in a number of different ways. The pink flowers on the left is even called fireweed. It's one of the first flowers, one of the first plants to come back after wildfire has come through. And so we'll talk a little bit about the history of the relationship between humans and wildfire, especially over the last 100 years. Our attitudes towards wildfire has shifted, and a lot of people have historically thought of wildfire as kind of a destructive force on the landscape and something that should be stopped or managed. But we'll talk about how nature kind of knows what it's doing. And in places like Glacier, there are a lot of species that need fire, that kind of rely on fire for their life history, for that cycle. And so we're going to talk about it, and we're going to see a lot of evidence of it. In fact, fires happen there every year. And so we anticipate that over the course of a season, there might even be wildfires in Glacier. Sometimes it's smoky. Sometimes certain areas are closed. And so it's still a very active part of that landscape. On the right-hand side, you can see this is Grinnell Glacier, one of the glaciers that are found in Glacier National Park. There are still a few of them, about 25, 26 glaciers are currently fall under the designation of an active glacier. They're in the park. Obviously, climate change is having a big influence on their size and how many are found in the park. But Glacier National Park it's not actually named for the glaciers that exist in the park, which they do, but because of the influence that glaciers have had on the landscape. And so as we travel across this landscape, yes, we will see a few glaciers, but more prominent is going to be the evidence of the historic glaciers, especially from the last Pleistocene, the Ice Age era of, ended 10 to 20,000 years ago. The evidence of those larger glaciers is everywhere. And I mean, if you look in a textbook under, what a large glacier does to a landscape, you basically could take a snapshot from almost any place in Glacier National Park, because those landscape features are just found everywhere. And so that's why Glacier National Park is called Glacier National Park. That's where it got its name. And again, that's something that we talk about on the trip, and it's something that we see just across the landscape throughout the course of the trip. We also talk at length about the human history, and the people that have been on the landscape. And there's kind of, there are different groups that have had influences on the landscape, one of which is the indigenous groups. On the west side, that's primarily the Kootenai and the Salish people, the Flathead people. On the east side, it's the Blackfeet. They were kind of the primary dominant group throughout the glacier ecosystem, where the mountains kind of meet the plains on the east side of the Continental Divide. And I think one of the real highlights of this trip is that we get to spend some time with some Blackfeet friends. This is Alger in the photo from Blackfeet Outfitters. And we go for a hike and we do a little cultural presentation. And, we get to learn about the relationship between these people in this landscape, because that relationship goes back, more than 10,000 years. And so, again, that relationship is very valuable. There's a lot that we can learn from it. And, that's something that we want to tell these stories of the relationship between these people in this landscape. I am not Blackfeet, so it's not necessarily my story to tell. So we do our best to have those voices tell the story themselves. And so that's a real highlight of the trip, is the time that we get to spend, with Alger and friends and some of the voices that tell that story. And it's really a highlight, something I look forward to every trip that we do up there. There are some other stories on the landscape, such as the going to the Sun Road, which some folks may have heard of. If you're traveling to Glacier, anyone that has been to Glacier in the past will probably ask you, like, oh, did you drive going to the Sun Road? It's an incredible feat of engineering, and we get to do a red bus tour, a historic red bus tour, and we learn about, kind of the national park history. Glacier became a national park in 1910, and so we get to learn about the first folks that were coming here as tourists, as visitors. And then another big part of that human history is the history of the railroad, because the railroad throughout the American West is a big part of that story as well. A lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the politics, even Glacier becoming a national park, the railroad had a big influence on that. And so we learn about that story because, again, just like wildfires, just like glaciers, you see evidence of these stories on the landscape as well. One of the ways that we see some of that history on the landscape is through the historic lodges. This is a photo of Glacier Park Lodge, which is one of the lodges that were built by the railroad. Here's a photo inside of the lobby area. And so one of the other highlights of this trip is that NatHab, we stay in those historic lodges throughout the trip. And they're incredible buildings with really fascinating histories. And I think one of the most valuable parts of staying in these lodges, they are old buildings. Sometimes they don't have all the amenities of a modern hotel. But their locations are unparalleled because they are, in the park. There are few places to stay where you're inside the boundaries of the park, where you can see wildlife right from your hotel window. And so on each trip, we prioritize the best locations where we can find wildlife. And fortunately for us on this trip, those best locations are going to be in these beautiful historic lodges. So, okay. So shifting gears a little bit, we're really excited that we have these Mercedes Sprinter Safari vehicles that are custom outfitted for these trips. We've been upgrading our fleet over the last couple of years, and so we're really excited to have some brand new vehicles with a lot of bells and whistles. They're basically, they're literally customized specifically for the types of trips that we run. So we have, roof hatches. So if we have a close encounter with, say, a black bear like this one up in Waterton, we can observe those animals in a way that's, safe for them, safe for us. And, we get a phenomenal experience with the wildlife, because these vehicles are outfitted specifically for that purpose. They're also, the way most of our trips run is we will have 2 vans and 2 guides with between 10 and 14 guests. And so you do the math on that, that's only about 5 to 7 guests per vehicle, because we prioritize everybody getting a window seat. We're not going to cram a whole bunch of people into one van because, um, traveling from one place to another through landscapes like this is in and of itself kind of a beautiful, incredible experience just because of how beautiful and incredible the landscapes are. So making sure that we do that safely and comfortably and in a way that everybody can appreciate those views is a priority for us. When you come on the trip, we'll do a more lengthy vehicle orientation and we'll talk a little bit more about some of those features. But that's rule number 2. So everybody will ask, what's rule number 1? Rule number 1 is you will never go hungry on a NatHab trip. And if you've been on a NatHab trip before, you know that that is true. And on this particular itinerary, our Glacier trip, we do have a pretty good mix of field meals that we will have out in the field, and also sit down meals in restaurants, sometimes at the lodges. But we've also spent a lot of time locating some really great restaurants kind of throughout this part of the world. So we kind of get a mix of experiences. A lot of our lunches are going to be pretty simple field lunches. It might be even while we're out on a hike. And because again, the priority of these trips is exploring this landscape and trying to find wildlife. And so one of the best ways to do that is to have that flexibility of having our lunches kind of while we're out adventuring, and then we come back and have a nice, wonderful, delicious sit-down dinner. We also get all of your dietary preferences and restrictions ahead of time. And, over the last number of years that we've been doing this, we've been able to accommodate, all of those dietary preferences on these trips. So just make sure you communicate that to us. So as we're getting ready for the trip, we make sure we can take good care of you, and we make sure that you don't go hungry. All right, I'm going to take a few minutes to kind of walk through the itinerary. So again, this is a 9-day trip. So let's start out with day 1. Kalispell, Montana is the closest airport to where we begin the trip. So if you fly in on day 1, you'll get picked up at the airport by one of your expedition leaders. If you do want to come early, that's totally fine. That's a great idea. If you're arriving before day 1, just make sure you arrange that transport from the airport to our hotel in Whitefish. It's only about a 18-minute drive, so the airport is not far from where we're staying. And where we're staying is Whitefish, Montana. Great little mountain town you can see here in the photo. We stay basically just, it's almost in this picture, but it's a very easily walkable downtown with a lot of cool shops and restaurants. You can walk right to Whitefish Lake. So again, if folks do want to come a day or two early, this is a really neat place to, spend a day or two exploring. So if you do, again, just arrange your own transportation. But regardless of when you arrive on day 1 that evening, we'll have an orientation where you get to meet your guides and your fellow travelers. And then as a group, we'll drive about 5 minutes up to a restaurant, and we'll have our first dinner together to cap off day 1 before we get a good night's sleep, because day 2 is our first big full day together. Day 2, in the morning, we go and do a little scenic float on the Flathead River, which is a great kind of introduction to the landscape. We have, river guides that kind of complement what your guides will be saying, and we'll kind of interpret the landscape and kind of give you some background information about what we're going to be seeing over the next, total of 9 days. One note about that float, we do have to step into the water a little bit, about up to our ankles. So I like to bring chacos. I'll mention this again in the packing section. So if you don't want to pack shoes that can get wet, they do provide little booties for getting onto that that raft. It's not a crazy whitewater float. It's just kind of a nice, gentle, scenic float down the river, looking for wildlife, looking at the beautiful views. Then we'll have some lunch. And after lunch is when we do our red bus tour. You can see the photo of the red bus going through one of the tunnels on going to the Sun Road. And we explore the west side of going to the Sun Road. You're going to hear me talk a lot throughout this presentation about the west side of the park versus the east side of the park. And that's because one of the really fascinating features that makes Glacier National Park unique is that the Continental Divide goes right, almost directly north-south through the park. And so that creates some differences from the west side to the east side, just because of weather patterns and topography, and that has an influence on vegetation, which has, kind of that cascading effect on the wildlife and the things that we see. So in this presentation, I'll talk a little bit about, we'll explore the west side the first few days, and then we'll explore the east side. So we'll do the west side of going to the Sun Road, and then we'll end that night staying in one of those historic lodges right on the shores of Lake McDonald. Day 3, we're going to do a little morning hike, again on the west side, so we get to explore, like you can see in the photo, kind of like those lush, conifer forests that have some species that we really primarily find in the Pacific Northwest. So the landscape on the west side of the park does look different from the landscape on the east side. So we'll do a little hike and talk more about some of those differences. Then we're going to continue on going to the Sun Road. We're going to go up and over and down onto the east side. And in the afternoon, after lunch, we'll do another hike on the east side. So again, this is a really cool day because we get to, literally compare before and after lunch. We'll be exploring on foot the west and east sides of the park. Then we'll make our way up to Many Glacier, where we'll be spending the next 2 nights. And this is the Many Glacier Hotel that we stay at right on the shores of Swift Current Lake. Beautiful spot. And that sets us up really well because, again, we're spending 2 nights there. So day 4, we have the whole day to explore the Many Glacier area. Incredible place to look for wildlife. Possibly my favorite part of the trip. There's a lot of highlights on this trip, but the Many Glacier Valley is stunning. In the morning, we're going to go for a little hike. In order to get to our hike, we have to take 2 little boat rides, and this is one of them. This is one of the boats that we take to our morning trailhead. And yeah, we'll do a short hike that morning, and then in the afternoon, we'll have a couple of options for folks. Because one thing to keep in mind is that this is a 9-day trip, and we do quite a bit of hiking. The hikes are generally relatively short, 1 to 3 miles, but that adds up pretty quick, and people can get tired. And so we try to leave these windows of time that if people do want to rest, we have time to rest, or if people really just want to keep exploring and want to stay active, we have that option as well. So day 4, the afternoon, is one of those times where there's kind of some choice if you want to relax, on the shores of Swift Current Lake right at the hotel, or if you want to do a little more hiking, we'll have those options. The following day, we'll be making our way up to Canada, so make sure you have your passports on your person, day 5. And we're going to make our way up to Waterton Lakes National Park. Again, we're going to be spending 2 nights up here. And so when we arrive, we'll do a little hike that afternoon. Basically, that afternoon hike is going to be along the right-hand side of the photo there, kind of along Upper Waterton Lake, which you can see here in the photo. And yeah, as you can see, Waterton Lakes National Park is just incredibly stunning. And so staying here 2 nights also sets us up really well to spend day 6 kind of exploring that whole region. Kind of like day 4, we'll have a hiking activity in the morning, then we'll have some lunch. In the afternoon, we'll do a boat ride as well on Upper Waterton Lake. But we'll also have a little window of time in the afternoon for some different options. If folks want to rest on day 6, they can, But Waterton Lakes also has a little village town site right in the park. And it's a really cute little town, and we've had some requests in the past for time to explore the little town. And so we leave a couple hours if folks want to do that as well. So again, the afternoon of day 6, some flexibility depending on how folks are feeling. All right, day 7, we're going to be leaving Canada. We're going to be headed south back into the United States. And our big hike for the trip, kind of the crux, the pinnacle, is we're going to go up to Logan Pass, which is basically the high point of going to the Sun Road. It's right on the Continental Divide, and it's an opportunity for us to go on a hike in the alpine, above tree line. And if you're familiar with the habitats and the ecosystems out here in the American West, you might know that there are certain species that you can only find way up in the high alpine. There are some critters like mountain goats, like the one in this photo here, that really prefer that high rocky terrain. And so this hike is a really cool opportunity to get up above tree line, to look for some of those more elusive animals. And after that hike, we're going to continue back out to the east side and make our way south to East Glacier Park. And again, we're going to be spending the next 2 nights. This will be the final 2 nights of the trip on the east side in the town of East Glacier Park. So day 8, this is kind of our last full day together. This is where we get to hang out with Alger and some of his friends from Blackfeet Outfitters. We'll do a little hike. We'll do a cultural presentation. There's going to be an opportunity for folks to ask questions and just kind of engage in conversation. And again, really incredible opportunity to learn about not just the landscape, but about the people who have had a relationship with this landscape for thousands of years. That afternoon, we'll do our final boat ride, a historic boat ride across Two Medicine Lake, which is featured right here in the photo. Again, another incredible landscape. We'll be looking for wildlife. And then that evening will be our last dinner together. We go to a place called Summit Mountain Lodge, incredible food. Kind of a really unique spot because it's way out in the middle of nowhere, but their food's incredible. They treat our people really well, and it's a really great way to kind of cap our last full day of the trip. Day 9 is our departure day, so we'll be making our way back towards Whitefish and Kalispell, probably do a wildlife stop or 2 along the way. And then, we'll be getting folks to the airport or to the hotel or wherever they need to be to head off on their next adventure. And that'll wrap up our 9-day trip. So it truly is an incredible trip in that, we spend 9 days and we really get to explore all of the different regions of Glacier National Park. You might talk to people that have been to Glacier, and a lot of them might say like, oh yeah, we explored kind of the west side, or we went to this one place. I think the really incredible, valuable part of spending 9 days exploring this region is you really do it justice. We really get to see kind of all of the different habitats and ecosystems and regions of Glacier and Waterton. Okay. So I know you probably have questions, and I'll leave some time at the end if you have further questions, because I know packing for a landscape like Glacier can be difficult. So I'll try to break this down as simply as I can. As you may have noticed as I walk through the itinerary, we do a lot of hiking. Almost every day we'll have opportunities for 1 or maybe 2 hikes. So having good shoes is really important. And I want to make sure people know, like, don't go out and buy shoes the day or the week before the trip. It's important that they're kind of broken in, that that your feet are used to them. Because having shoes that are not quite the right fit or that are kind of untested in the field can wear you out and be kind of uncomfortable. So good shoes is important. Water bottle. NatHab sends folks water bottles before most trips, so make sure you bring that. I'll usually be carrying about 1 liter of water on these hikes in my Nalgene. Because staying hydrated is important. Even if the mornings start out kind of cool, it can get pretty hot up there, especially later in the season. So be prepared for warmer summer weather, and staying hydrated is really important. Sun protection. We do keep sunscreen in the vans, so that's available to you. If you have a particular kind that you want to bring that. But mostly what I'm referring to is clothing. And so you can see from these photos, a sun hat is important, maybe some light long sleeve shirts that, will protect you from the sun, also important. But yeah, that high elevation sun can be pretty harsh. And even if you protect yourself from sunburns by wearing lots of sunscreen, it can wear you out, if you're kind of exposed to the sun. Um, Optics. You can bring your binoculars if you want, but you don't have to, because NatHab does provide binoculars for everybody on these trips, which is really important. Having good optics is great, especially when we're looking for animals like mountain goats and bighorn sheep and grizzly bears, which might be kind of up in the alpine a little ways away. So we have binoculars. We also carry scopes that really help us, observe that animal behavior in its natural habitat. And feel free to bring a camera. And if you're interested in photography departures, we do have those as well. And those are a little bit more tailored to photographers. So if that's kind of a passion of yours, or you want to learn more from an experienced photography guide, feel free to ask your adventure specialist about those photography departures. But either way, feel free to bring a camera, and if that happens to be your phone, that's fine too. Like you can see in that photo on the right. Make sure to bring your passport, because again, like Rob said at the very beginning, this is a cross-border adventure, and so make sure your passport is not expired. Make sure you have it on you, because we'll be going across the border and then back. And then finally, let's talk about clothes. Wearing layers is really important, because being up in the mountains, a lot of times we'll start the day and it might be quite cool, might even feel cold. If it's like super early or late in the season, we might even see a little snow. We have seen, a dusting of snow on our last trip of the season a couple of times. Bring summer clothes. I think what folks are wearing in these photos is kind of perfect. As far as light long sleeves is always a good way to go. And then bring your rain gear. That's something that you always want to have on hand when you're out here in the mountains, because, you can look at the weather forecast, but storms and, rain showers can kind of roll in whenever they want. So having that rain gear accessible is pretty important. So please bring that as well. So I know that's a lot. In a few slides, I'll open it up to questions, and I know I'll have some questions about gear, but you can see here some of the average temperatures on the west side of the park. So you can see that the lows might be in the 40s, highs might be as high as the 80s. And these are averages. We can see extremes that might be, more or less than these numbers. And so you can see that we can see temperature swings over the course of a day that might be 30 to even 40 degree temperature swings. So layers, that's why we kind of stress layers, because that's kind of how you start in the morning, layered up, and then being able to shed throughout the day to remain comfortable is really important. Photography. So I mentioned the photography departures. One other thing I want to mention about photography is I usually bring 2 lenses with me. I don't go too crazy with like a big camera bag, but we do have opportunities for landscape photos and also wildlife photos. So I usually bring a shorter lens. I have an 18 to 135 that I use for landscapes, portraits, even some macro photography. But having a telephoto for wildlife is also good if you are planning on bringing a camera. Again, no pressure to do so, because another great thing that NatHab has been doing for the last couple of years is we have a photo sharing platform in the adventure portal. And so all of the photos, that your guides are taking, like we might be sprawled out on the beach trying to get a cool, sunset or bird photo or something like that. Those photos we will share with you via the photo sharing platform. And I'm going to stress this when we're on the trip, because one thing that I've seen is a lot of people that go on these trips kind of feel that stress or that anxiety of having to capture everything that we see, capturing every moment, every animal. And sometimes that need or that anxiety to try to capture everything kind of detracts from being present and from, really experiencing this place. So the fact that everybody on the trip, the guides and the guests, we can all share the photos that we take through this photo sharing platform. Really kind of alleviates some of that stress where, you don't have to take a photo of every single thing that we see. You can just experience the moment, be present, really try to connect with that animal or with that landscape, and know that somebody's probably going to get a picture that they'll be willing to share with you. So. All right, so I'm going to close with a few slides here talking about the wildlife on this trip. We never guarantee seeing any animals because wildlife, can be somewhat unpredictable. But these are some of the critters that we hope to see, some of the animals that we have seen on past trips. And I start with this slide because I love wildflowers. When you meet me in person, you'll see I've got a few tattoos. A lot of them are of my favorite wildflowers. And I just think Glacier, especially earlier in the season, some of our first few trips, we're going to get, some pretty vibrant colors like you can see in this photo here. But being up in high alpine areas like we will be on this trip, we really get some amazing colors. Because keep in mind, these places have very long winters, which means the summer is quite short. And so you don't, if you're a plant or a flower, you don't have a lot of time to reproduce, to pollinate. And so everything kind of goes at once. And usually that's when there's more moisture on the landscape. So again, those short summer seasons that we see up in Glacier are usually very vibrant with wildflowers. So yeah, if you're on one of my trips this season, we'll probably talk a lot about wildflowers. All right, so hopefully we'll see some bears. This is a beautiful black bear, even though I know it's brown. And we'll talk about the differences between black bears and grizzly bears. And grizzly bears are a brown bear. Because black bears can be a lot of different colors. And you may have noticed some of my other slides that have had bears in them have been kind of a range of colors, even, blonde or cinnamon. Not all black bears are black. So we'll be looking for black bears. We usually have a better chance of seeing black bears than grizzly bears for two reasons, one of which is there are more of them. There's about twice as many black bears in Glacier as there are grizzly bears. But there are grizzly bears up there, like this young one. And you can see one of the other reasons why we tend to see black bears more frequently is habitat as well. Black bears, they're adapted to climb trees, so they prefer forested areas, which tend to be down in valleys. And valleys are where humans also tend to live and build roads. And so the overlap between where humans go and where black bears go is a little bit larger than the overlap between where humans and grizzly bears go, because grizzly bears often like the high alpine areas for a number of different reasons. We'll talk about that. But again, on this trip, we do get to spend some time in the alpine, and so we'll be looking for grizzly bears while we're up there as well. All right. Beautiful photo of a moose here. And again, we're going to be traveling through a lot of great moose habitat. You may, if you're keeping track, I think we take a total of 5 different boats on this tour, and moose love water. So we are on the water quite a bit on this trip, which is great because that puts us, again, we overlap with the habitat that moose prefer quite a bit. And so we'll be keeping our eyes peeled for them. Okay, bighorn sheep. That's what we're seeing in the photo here. These are 5 rams. This was on the Hidden Lake Trail up at Logan Pass. And, you can see bighorn gets their name from those big curling horns that the rams have. The females, or the ewes, they also have horns. They're a little bit smaller. But, they're one of those animals that prefer kind of those high rocky alpine habitats. And so when we're up in the high alpine, or even when we're down in the valleys, we'll be scanning some of those mountaintops. We'll be scanning some of the cliffs and the rocky ridges looking for bighorn sheep. They are great at traversing some of these rocky, cliffy areas, but the ultimate mammal that is suited for these habitats is the mountain goat, like this one. This was actually on that same trail, different part of that trail, but up in that um, subalpine area where the trees are real short and kind of scraggly. We'll be looking for mountain goats, and mountain goats are kind of the iconic species, the iconic animal of Glacier National Park. You'll see it on a lot of logos and insignia of different companies around the area, because again, as you've been looking at these photos, you've seen some of these mountains are just incredibly rocky and steep, and so one of the only large mammals that really has evolved to thrive in those types of environments is the mountain goat. Okay, I think I'm gonna end it there. Looks like we have a little bit of time for questions. So, Rob, did we get some questions in the chat?
We sure did, Jake. And before we dive into them, I'd like to remind everybody that if you do have a question, you can submit them via the question field in your control panel. If you go to the upper right-hand corner, you'll see 3 lines there. They call that the hamburger. Go ahead and click on that hamburger, and you'll see a drop-down menu. Go to questions, and you can submit your questions in there. All right, so let's get to some of these questions. So we're going to see probably a wide range of weather. Is snow ever going to be an issue? Would it ever cancel the trip or close the roads even in June?
Um, so we start our trips in late June. The proposed opening of going to the Sun Road this year is June 22nd, and I think our first trip starts a few days after that. Um, I've only seen that once in my experience, where it was like a heavy snow year and there's some other issues. So, very, very unlikely scenario that snow would affect our trips at all. And even late season, mid-September when we start wrapping these trips up, we might see a little dusting of snow here and there, but it's pretty much only on the high peaks, and it's never really influenced our activities or our itinerary. So.
What about construction on going to the Sun Road? Would that affect it at all?
That can slow us down from time to time. They've had a couple of big projects in years past. Uh, those projects are complete now, so there might be a couple of small delays because obviously with a short summer season, that's also a short construction season. So sometimes we see some minor delays, but I'm not aware of any major construction that interrupts our particular itinerary. If folks are reading, you'll probably see that there's a big construction project up in the Many Glacier area. That project is past Many Glacier Hotel, so it doesn't impact us getting to Many Glacier or the activities that we do up there.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so there's a lot of questions about altitude on the hikes. How much altitude are we going to experience on the
Sure.
various hikes here?
Yeah, so Logan Pass is at 6,646 feet. And then the hike that we take, we go up a little ways from there. So we'll get up over 7,000 feet. Um, so depending on where you're coming from, there might be a little bit of influence of altitude, but it's not like climbing a 14er in Colorado or going to Machu Picchu. It's pretty minor. In fact, even our Yellowstone trip gets up over 8,000 feet. So if it's ever an issue, it's a very minor issue. Yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned about that. Most of our hikes actually are in river valleys, and we take a boat in a lake valley. So really, the only hike that we do that's up 6,000 to 7,000 feet is going to be that hidden lake overlook at Logan Pass. Most of our hikes, you're not going to notice a significant influence of elevation.
Great, thank you for that. And how long are the hikes going to be, and what kind of a pace would you say?
Sure. Yeah. So like I said, we have options, which is great. This trip, we get a lot of help from other guide companies. So you'll probably have 2 guides that work for NatHab. You might have 1 or 2 guides, whether it's Blackfeet Outfitters or one of our other contractors. And those having multiple guides means that we can go at different paces. We usually open it up to be like, hey, if folks just want to go a half a mile and turn back, you can do that. If folks want to go 3 or 4 miles, Jake is willing to go with that group. So we have a lot of flexibility to cater to different, wants and needs on those hikes. I would say if you were to do some of the, max out some of the hikes, We might do a couple that we would have the option to go 4 miles, 4 to 5 miles. And again, that's if you really want to get after it, we can provide that opportunity. Um, but yeah, pace is slow. Pace is flexible. These are wildlife trips where you have naturalist guides that will stop and talk about wildflowers probably longer than you want to stop and talk about wildflowers. So when we see interesting things, we stop and we talk about them. We are not, these are not necessarily fitness trips. And the reason why we do so much hiking is because Glacier National Park, um, there's really only one road going to the Sun Road that goes through the park. Everything else is wilderness. Everything else is accessible pretty much only by trail. And so the best way to see Glacier is going to be on foot on those trails. So, and that's what we want to do is see this place. So I wouldn't worry about it being strenuous as far as pace, because again, we have flexibility and we like to talk.
So an average level of fitness would suffice, you would say.
Yeah, yeah, I think that would be fine. And again, if you're a little above or a little below, we can accommodate that as well.
Beautiful. And what about hiking poles? Should I bring hiking poles or does NatHab provide those for us?
We provide those. Yep. Yeah,
That
if you have a particular set that you really like, that you're comfortable with, feel free to bring them, but we do have trekking poles with us.
okay, so let's ask the most important question that we could possibly ask.
Wait, can
Bathrooms.
I? I knew it. I was gonna answer that. Yeah, plenty of bathrooms. It's a national park, so some of those restrooms are going to be pit toilets, vault toilets, outhouses, whatever you want to call them. Mornings and evenings, obviously, between the hotels and the restaurants, we will have flush toilets. But throughout the course of the day, some of those restrooms will probably be pit toilets, but there are plenty of them. So. Yeah, the thing I always say is, I worked for a coffee company when I was a forklift driver for 10 years. I still drink a ton of coffee, so I have to stop, all the time. So I wouldn't be concerned about that.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, let's dive into some more questions here. Yeah, how long a telephoto lens would you recommend that I
Hmm.
bring? 100 to 400 millimeter, 200 to 600 millimeter. I mean, obviously, we have to be concerned about weight.
Yeah, I would say I would err on the side of portability, because the cliche goes the best lens is the one that you actually use, or the best camera is the one that you actually use. So if you bring a monster 600 prime, it's unlikely that you're going to want to take that on every hike that we go on. I use a 70 to 350. So it's definitely not the most powerful lens out there, but it's only about this big, so I can fit it in my hiking pack. And to me, that's more important than having, the biggest, baddest lens out there. I would say a 1 to 4 is great. 2 to 6, I mean, obviously is going to be great as well. You're just going to get into that question of like, do I really want to carry this for 3 miles? um, so yeah, I would err on the side of portability.
Gotcha. Thank you. And so you mentioned we're going to be on the water a bunch. Should I be worrying about my hiking boots getting wet? Are we going to leave them someplace on the shore? How does that going to work for us?
Sure. Yeah. So that day 2 raft scenic float that we take, that one we do step in the water. Like I said, they provide booties. So if you don't want to pack, specific shoes for that one experience, you don't need to. All of the rest of them are those kind of larger wooden. They're all historic boats, beautiful boats, but they all leave from a dock. So you don't step in the water. You just step directly from the dock onto the boat. So you can wear your hiking shoes. You don't have to bring a change of shoes on those boats or anything.
Great. Good to know. Um, so can you talk about the major differences between the two parks? Are they still well managed and maintained? Are we going to notice any differences when we're there?
Yeah. So they're both incredibly well maintained. Again, a lot of changes to the park system have happened in the last few months, and the last few months have been winter in Glacier, so I haven't been up there. So we'll see. I know a lot of parks are understaffed right now, so that might mean, certain facilities might be closed. They might have weird hours. We don't have any concrete reasons to expect any differences other than just kind of this loose, shady idea that things might be a little tougher for them right now. Um, but yeah, no, we don't anticipate any major influence to our trips or changing any of the things that we're doing. Doesn't mean that we have to be a little bit more. I shouldn't say more. It means that we have to be extra diligent as far as leave no trace, because there might be fewer people out there to um, pick up trash or manage wildlife that might be attracted to trash. So it means that there's a little bit more responsibility on us as visitors to these places to visit responsibly, which again, NatHab prides itself in doing already. So it's really not a major change, in our expectations or our practices. Um, but yeah, as far as Waterton goes, um, major differences. The signs are a different color, but they're both incredibly well maintained parks. And again, it's the same ecosystem. They are very much in communication with how they manage the wildlife in those two different places. So on the ground, not a lot of differences that we really see.
Great, thank you. Now, you showed a picture a little while ago of a plant with tall white plumes. Do, do
Yeah,
you know, what is that plant?
yeah, it's called bear grass. And the joke goes, it's not a grass and bears don't eat it. Yeah, that's another iconic species up in Glacier. It blooms pretty early. So, we really only see that in a handful of places later in the season. But it's an incredibly beautiful flower. It's in the lily family. It's actually kind of this plume of little tiny white flowers. Um, yeah, we talk about it at length. Like I said, the later in the season you get, the lower the chance of seeing beargrass because it blooms pretty early. So if that's a priority for you to see beargrass and get that kind of iconic photo, I would say book your trip as early as possible.
Great.
But being in the high alpine, there are a couple of kind of secret spots that we know about where we look for them even later in the season because depending on shade, snow, soil moisture, there can be a few stragglers here and there that we'll try to get a photo of.
Great, thank you. So, what about bugs and mosquitoes? Are they an issue? Should I bring bug spray? Will that be available to us there?
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about bringing bug spray. We always buy it. We always have it in the vans, and we almost never use it. There's a couple of hikes that we do, near the water, which occasionally there might be a few bugs, but it's rarely been an issue. And again, we'll take care of that. We'll bring bug spray.
Great, thank you. So, what is the likelihood that we would run into a bear, and will the
Hmm.
guides have bear spray, or do we have to worry at all about our safety there?
You do not need to be concerned about your safety around bears. Um, the we are very experienced in bear country. Your guides know what to do. Obviously, we use best practices around bears, so we're not, influencing them, we're not harassing them, and obviously we're keeping ourselves safe from them. We do carry bear spray. We do again have these vehicles, so if we do see them close to the road or something like that, we're not going to do anything foolish like pull up and everybody pile out, and there's a bear 20 yards away. um, so a lot of that, the way that I do it and most guides do it is probably at some point on day two, we'll kind of, as a whole group, we'll talk about bears and we'll talk about bear safety, and we'll make sure that we're all on the same page as far as like, okay, if we're on a hike and we see a bear, what do we do? So we communicate that very clearly. Um, but yeah, it's rarely an issue. You've probably seen in the news over the last few years. There have been a couple of incidents with bears, but you do the math on the number of incidents with bears versus the number of visitors that explore that area, and you can start to figure out that it's a pretty minor, almost negligible issue, but we still are very serious about making sure we know what to do when we're hiking through bear country.
Great, thank you. So, Jake, let me ask you, is there one favorite place or experience on this trip that you're most excited to share with our guests?
Hmm. um, Boy, that's always a tough one because, well, among guides, we always joke that, you know, many Glacier versus Waterton. They are both incredibly beautiful, glacially carved valleys with these iconic alpine lakes with wildlife. That if you scan the mountainsides long enough around these lakes, you will see wildlife in either of those places. So I'll probably prep my groups by saying like, all right, like keep that in mind. I'm going to ask if you have a favorite, and it's going to be really hard for you to choose one. Because again, and just where the hotels are situated, it's like just, um, yeah, both of those places are pretty incredible. As far as an experience goes, hanging out with Alger's a great guy. He's a good friend of mine. And he just has a really tactful and charismatic way of talking about Blackfeet history and Blackfeet politics. And I learn so much from him literally every time we hang out. And so I would say for an experience, hanging out with Alger is great. For a landscape, that's a tough one. So.
Great. We appreciate it, Jake. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on this trip with us. Unfortunately, that is going to be the last question that we do have for today. So I'd like to throw it back to you for any closing comments you may have for us.
Glacier is, and this is just going to sound cliche and just me waxing poetic, but it's an incredible place. The landscape is incredible. Even if we saw no animals, it is worth going to see at least once in your life. And with a NatHab guide, you're probably going to see animals too. So,
Jake, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who joined us today. If you are interested in information on how you can travel with us, please give us a call at the number on your screen, 800 543 8917, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. NatHab's adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us Monday for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out next week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude today's webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We will see you next time.